This is Descr, Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3 page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo Descr. This is flyer number 416, part 2, entitled The Masculist Volcano. Carrying straight on. We masculists tell young men not to have relationships with women like you, that is, misandrist, man-dumping, feminazi bitches. We use women like you as anti-models to young women, telling them that if they end up like you, then they will pay a very heavy price. That is, they will not get a man, since men refuse to have relationships with feminazis who hate men. Women like you are the first to be rejected by men, left to rot on the shelf, since more and more men are being influenced by masculist ideas and want nothing to do with feminazis, who are the most reviled category of women, the first to be rejected by men, even more rejected than women who are obese, and obese women make men puke. We masculists expect women, including feminists, to become biconscious, that is, to have both their feminist and their masculist consciousness raised, so that the suffocating monoconscious bile you feminists keep sprouting is combated by a much stronger masculist case in the opposite direction. As masculist ideas spread throughout the world, monoconscious feminists like yourself will come under tremendous moral pressure from both sexes, since we masculists tell young women that the main reason why they are unable to persuade the quality young men they really want to mate with to give these young women their sperm is that you hated fluffy feminist hypocrites have taken over the divorce courts and made divorce, and hence marriage and paternity, so toxic, such a shitty deal for men, that they wipe their hands of marriage and paternity. Young men now utterly reject taking a 1 in 4 chance of having custody of their kids ripped away from them by the hated fluffy feminist divorce court lawyers and judges. So they go their own way. They live the MGTOW lifestyle, in brackets, MGTOW, MGTOW equals men going their own way, an important branch of the men's lib movement. They refuse to marry and refuse to give young women their sperm. Masculists tell these young women to hate the fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, so that fluffy feminists are hated by both sexes. Once that happens, and it's only a few years away given the rate at which masculist ideas are spreading across the globe, and how quickly young women are learning from the masculists that their babylessness is a consequence of the financial massacring of one father in 4, by you hated fluffy feminist hypocrites. You fluffy feminists will be crushed by the moral force against you coming from both sexes. The masculists hate you for your awful hypocritical gender crimes against men, and young women will hate you for causing their babylessness. When you come out with your feminist claims that men are toxic, then we masculists just want to bite your fucking heads off, since in reality the reverse is far worse. Most of you women are fluffy parasites. You oppress men far worse than vice versa. It was men who liberated women from household drudgery by giving women the pill, household gadgets, science-based medicine, a female life expectancy well into the 80s, so that even those women who stay at home looking after their 2 kids for 6 years until the 2nd kid is off to kindergarten still have a career window of half a century. So women can work, so must work. Anything else is man's slavery. Thus the masculists put enormous moral pressure on women to fip up, to pull their financial weight, and not expect to parasite off the money and labour of a man. In the limit, if the carnage occurring in the fluffy feminist controlled divorce courts continues, then the percentage of young men who refuse to marry and reject paternity will probably be over 90% within a decade, in which case whole populations will be wiped out within a mere generation. So that makes you fluffy feminist indirect genociders who obviously have to be stopped, or whole populations will disappear within a century or less. When the very survival of a culture is threatened, it often goes to war to remove the threat. Responsible males, masculist soldiers, will not tolerate that you hated fluffy feminist genociders continue to financially massacre and destroy the lives of one father in 4, which is what you are currently doing. If you do continue your dictatorship of the divorce courts, then there will be a sex war. Masculist soldiers will assassinate the feminazi gender politicians who made these deeply misandrous gender laws in the first place. Masculist soldiers will murder thousands of feminazi divorce court lawyers and judges. And if the sex war really heats up, masculist soldiers will go into the streets and simply shoot millions of feminazis, that is MFBs, that's monoconscious feminazi bigots, like yourself. Masculists are enraged at the monoconscious and bigoted ignorance of you feminazis. You don't give a shit about men. You keep whining about how men oppress women when the reverse case is much stronger. We masculists are sick to death of your misandry, so we are giving you now a very strong dose of your own medicine. A few years from now, those women who are not biconscious will come under tremendous moral pressure from masculists and female masculists, since MFBs will be seen as being callous towards men, bigoted, ignorant of men's issues, utterly hypocritical in their monoconscious attitudes and gender bias. Increasingly, as masculists come across the monoconscious ignorance of feminists, they will bite their fucking heads off, these MFBs, by gender politically haranguing them out of the room. Masculists are becoming increasingly angry and hateful at what the monoconscious fluffy feminists have done in the divorce courts and their indirect genocide of whole populations. Masculists tell MFBs like yourself that it's actually in your self-interest to become biconscious, since biconscious feminists are much more likely to have a boyfriend. Biconscious feminists usually have their hatred of men for the ways that men oppress women more or less cancelled by a corresponding and oppositely directed hatred of women for the ways that women oppress men, and in fact far worse, given that women's oppression of men is continuous and lasts decades. So expect in the next few years a volcanic explosion coming from the masculists against monoconscious fluffy feminists like yourself. A few years from now, nearly every man you come across, especially the quality ones, will have been infected by the masculist virus. So will not tolerate being harangued by a monoconscious feminazi, especially when they know that women oppress men far worse. So they will bite your fucking head off the way I'm doing now, but it will be far worse, since the haranguing you're getting now is rather minor in comparison to the collective rage that will come from men when nearly every man agrees with the masculists. They will be so intolerant of your monoconscious feminazi ignorance and callousness towards men that they will simply get off their chairs, walk up to your stage, and without saying a word, will bitch slap you to the ground. In case you're not well informed just what a bitch slap is, it's a slap across the face of a bitch, a woman, by a man, delivered with full male force. Since a man is on average 3 times stronger across the chest than a woman, if you are ever bitch slapped, you will never want to be bitch slapped a second time for the rest of your life, since it is so painful. You will be hit so hard with full male force that you will be sent flying to the floor like a sack of potatoes. The hatred against you fluffy feminist hypocrites is now so strong amongst men and growing that you will see it as a volcano, a masculist volcano. Once millions of men become convinced that fluffydom is manslavery and that manslavery is slavery, then you fluffy feminist hypocrites, who are seen by masculists as both manslavers and hypocrites, you will be crushed. You will be the victims of the masculist volcano. You will be smothered by masculist red-hot lava. You will be buried in masculist hate because you are seen as being parasitic, manslaving genociders to be exterminated before you exterminate whole populations, which is what you are currently doing. You have to be stopped. That's our job. You will convert yourselves into becoming biconscious, or we masculists and masculist soldiers will destroy you. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 410 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses, freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.